So based on a lot of the questions we've had is sort of, uh, how strict should you be in terms of following? And I know a few of the athletes are sort of like, there is that potential to feel a little bit of failure if you don't hit all your macronutrients targets that we set out. And let's go through that today in terms of, what to do if you have a blowout today in terms of, managing any fear or anxiety around that. And then we'll obviously open it up to any questions you may have that are either related to these topics or maybe anything else that you want to cover. So I think, look, and I've talked about this recently on a few podcasts. I think a couple of the things that I would really say is think about your purpose. And we talked about this again, I think on a Q&A the other day, is like really think about what you're doing. And I think you can even take this back to maybe what is your overarching desire, to achieve from this program, and maybe even from triathlon on its own. Like, did you get into the sport of triathlon to win races, win your age group, or did you get into triathlon simply to improve your health along those lines? So I think having a high arching sort of direction as to why you're actually doing what you're doing and then applying that to nutrition is very important in this, because what that then tends to do, so if you say your purpose is to get healthier, then you start looking at what your intent is. And I think if you then go with what your intent is, and your intent may be, again, if we're talking about health and potentially if you're overweight, your intent may be to lose some weight. Now, that intention is going to have big implications on, what you do with your nutrition plan and how you manage that nutrition plan in connection with your coach, because that's then going to direct the purpose. Now, if your overarching goal is health and it's potentially to lose weight, the purpose of the training may need to be talked about with your coach, because if you have a lot of race intensity type training with a lot of duration, a lot of load, it's going to be quite difficult to, well, it's not going to be quite difficult. It's going to be a little bit more stress on the body if you're trying to go into a large caloric deficit at the same time. And it's going to mean that you're competing against each other. So what we mean by this is if you're getting given a lot of race pace type sessions, then you need to be thinking about, I need to fuel these for the purpose of what I'm trying to achieve, i.e., if that's FTP, if it's going at race pace, you're practicing race type bricks, you certainly don't want to be trying to restrict calories at that point in time, because for the purpose of losing weight, because it's actually going to have a negative impact on those sessions that you're doing. So, and then the flip side of that is obviously if you are trying to perform, if you are trying to lose weight, but then you're taking in a lot of calories around that, then you're also going against what you're trying to achieve. So I think the overarching discussion here is when you're looking at your nutrition program, you need to be discussing it with your coach and working in potentially mini blocks when you're coming around that. So does that make sense to everyone? Because I think it's something that just keeps rearing its head, and it's something that you really, really, be open with us and say, what are we trying to get you to do? Because I think this can be lost in terms of where you set your weight goal as well. And I just want to really hammer home that point, because it is so important when you're actually adjusting your weight goal relative to what you're trying to achieve on a week-to-week basis under our program, because it is going to impact the amount of food we give you. And that's, that awareness of that is going to be super important, because I know with a couple of the athletes and, where they might have that long-term sort of goal of reaching a particular weight, but that's impacting what they're currently doing in their current training program, with lead into things to races like Oceanside and Texas. So I just want to really hammer that home in terms of think about your purpose of what you're trying to achieve with your coach and also personally at that point in time. And so if we then go into I know, Rach, do you mind if we just have a sort of a little chat about this?
Yeah.
I think you're a real, so everyone knows Rach, I think. Rach, professional triathlete who more recently, would you say getting into MTB mountain biking?
Oh yeah, I've only ridden my mountain bike twice.
Well, you have been injured, so
yes.
Do you want to just give a quick background of you, Rach?
Sure.
Don't mind.
Like my racing background or my nutrition background?
Give your racing backgrounds, I think, so everyone can just appreciate your background, and then we can talk about your nutrition.
Sure. So I've been a full-time professional triathlete since 2011, and I am a 3-time Ironman 70.3 champion. I have 2 medals from ITU long distance world champs. And I have won Red Bull 400, and I have couple of Ironman bike course records. And yeah, now I am part of the Lifetime Grand Prix, which is a mountain biking / gravel series that is the first of its kind. I race as a non-binary racer in gravel because they have that category available. I identify as non-binary. And
I didn't know that, Rach.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's super really cool. Yeah. Although in the series, I am in the female category because they didn't have a non-binary category for that series yet. And yes, Cameron.
Does that mean you can race across 2 categories? Could you potentially win both?
No.
Oh.
No, definitely not. Yeah.
Thank you. It's does anyone have any questions? I know it's always nice when you get, I think, for fellow age groupers and just the everyday
I'm an open book.
hero warrior triathletes. Yeah, so Rach is great with just asking questions. So if you got any questions at any time, just feel free to pipe up. But the reason I wanted to bring Rach into this is because we've had some, unfortunately, she's had some injuries recently, which is obviously, as all of you know, it can be quite depressing, I guess, and it can get you down. And I think what we've learned with Rach as well is that when she was looking at the program, she often felt a level, especially when her training volume dropped due to the injury, she felt this level of sort of failure because she wasn't hitting her macro targets. Now, the reason for that also, it probably comes down to me, is that I wasn't aware, or we weren't being made aware of that failure or that sensation of failure, because what we were applying was what we believe to be the correct amounts. Oh, I just lost that. That's all right. What we believe to be the right amounts of calories at that point in time. Jay, we've just lost, have we lost the screen? What we believe to be the right amount of calories for the training and the recovery of her injury. But the reality was that it was actually still way too low, because her goal was set at weight loss. And because their goal was set at weight loss, it meant that the amount of calories being applied was too low for their training program. And so what we did after discussion and Rach making us aware of this, we reset their target to actually a maintenance type program. And what that instantly does is bump the calories up. So this comes back to the purpose of what you're trying to do. You can change your weight goal at any time in the app. And what that will have a significant impact on is the amount of energy being provided to you. So back to what I was rambling on about with Fuel with Purpose is, if you know that your coach is setting a lot of, even for 1 week, a really high amount of, training with race purpose and really going for it, then put your weight target to where you're currently at. or even a little bit above that if you actually want to really max out sort of and really ensure that you've got maximum amount of calories and energy being provided. Because it will instantly change your program prescription. If, however, you're in that big, like I want to drop 5 kilos and yet you're doing this heavy training load, you're still going to be provided in a caloric deficit. And that's really important just to understand. So like Rach, when you were looking at it, can you describe sort of how you were feeling?
Yeah, so I when I was in there, I was like what felt like the calorie targets just seemed really unreasonable. Like I would feel like I was totally starving to death. And recognizing that, like, I know I'm not trying to lose weight at this moment. Like, if anything, I probably need to gain a little bit of weight. And so it made me feel like I was failing every day, and that's not a great feeling to have. And so it definitely, like, I yeah, it just took a conversation and like with Scott and Elizabeth to just be like, okay, you know, I'm in a different place. Like, I'm not trying to lose. So yeah.
And even on that, like if you do sustain an injury, and again, this is the common misconception, a lot of people will think they're injured, they need to cut their calories down. The reality is your body's actually probably crying out for more energy to actually repair that. If it is a musculoskeletal type injury where your body is going through a state of inflammation and repair, the most important thing you can do is not be in a caloric deficit at that point in time. Like, forget about losing weight. Again, fuel with purpose, make us aware. Like, again, I didn't know that Rach was injured for a period of time. And then it's like, oh, I'm injured. Oh, and then we're still in the wrong type of program with the wrong type of purpose for what they were trying to achieve. And so it often just takes a message, or at least at the start of the week, on that Saturday or Sunday, of just looking at your program in the week ahead from your coach and going, you know what, I don't really need to worry about losing weight this week. Let's reset that target goal and just work towards that. And that's just a little bit of feedback to and fro, but also can be self-managed really, really easily by yourself. Do we go to the next one, Jay?
Elliot, do you have a question?
Oh, sorry. Oh, there are a lot of questions. Okay.
No.
You good?
I'm good.
Good. So I think, and back to Rach, like, I think one of the overriding things that when we were discussing this was don't panic. It doesn't matter. It does matter and it doesn't matter. I don't want you to get that wrong, because there is a point to the macronutrients, and it is important to think about the macronutrients for what you're trying to achieve. But it's also, remember that and I did put on the Facebook group yesterday, I put a really good podcast by Professor Graham Close, who was one of my lecturers. And I don't know if I'd regard him as a close friend, but he's certainly a friend of someone that I've spoken to several times. And they've written a paper about food first, but not always food. And I think the article or the paper, the journal paper itself, is really interesting, because what it also talks about is, when people are tracking or thinking they're eating particular foods, what you think is an absolute. And Rich Sansi, this could be a really important point for you, because I know there's been issues with some of the weight gain, or lack of weight loss. It comes down to, you have to remember that what's recorded on those barcodes and what you are tracking in these tracking systems most likely is not accurate. And I think this is really, really important to hit home. And he talks about salmon, and he talks about that they did analysis on a heap of different cans and products of salmon, for instance, and they were assessing omega-3 content in there. And not one tin and not one product had like what was reported on the tin. So in terms of omega-3 content, it was either super low, moderate, or off the charts high. And this comes down to apparently when the fish is caught. So like there's so many unknowns in the world of nutrition that whilst you're tracking and doing your best to understand what you're eating, don't look at everything in an absolute, because it's a ballpark figure is what you're trying to understand. So don't get so panicky about like missing it by 10 grams or 5 grams, and even probably, around 20 grams, you probably, especially when we're talking about protein, you're probably fine. It's getting an understanding of, are you generally hitting the mark with that? Because the tracking in itself often is just about knowledge, educating yourself on where the protein is coming. Are you getting enough protein in that ballpark figure to actually support what you're doing? And then looking at how you're actually feeling as an athlete from a subjective standpoint. So how is your mood? How is your energy? How is your hunger? And then if you are tracking objective markers, things like maybe with your Oura ring, maybe you're tracking your HRV, maybe you're tracking your minimum heart rate. How do those objective measures marry up to your subjective feelings, and how do they marry up to potentially the tracking that you're doing? And I think, he talks a lot about this, and I've always been, it's something that we're always aware of, that, and it's not just the actual ingredients that you scan the barcodes of and that, it's also the actual tracking systems, which may be inaccurate as well. So whatever you choose in MyFitnessPal, you need to be double checking that the macronutrients that you're selecting are actually accurate, because more often than not, even with the green tick now, I'm noticing in MyFitnessPal, sometimes isn't as accurate as what it probably should be. And I think what a lot of people are finding is that Lose It is potentially a better food tracking service than MyFitnessPal. Rich, you've got a pretty extensive experience in Lose It. Do you want to just want to talk about your experience with that?
Sure. I do think I don't have any experience with MyFitnessPal, and Jonathan and Vu and I have worked through some bugs, at least one good bug with the integration between Fuelin and Lose It. I tend to only go with the green check marks when I can, and I really try to eat mostly natural foods. Like I know I'm veering off the reservation when I'm eating something that's complicated or not not verified. Unfortunately, sometimes the food is just dull. Like I got to be honest, after like many years of keto and eating a high fat diet, eating a diet where I'm like sort of restricted to 75 grams of fat a day, like there's no taste some days. And so maybe if there were hints around like, what can we do on the fitness plan, on the nutrition plan that we're on, to have food that actually tastes good? Do you have any suggestions for that?
You mean around salads?
Oh, yeah. Right now I'm killing myself with salads. So, but outside is, I mean, I don't know. I feel like Bugs Bunny right now. In fact, I'm surprised that my ears haven't grown with all the salads I've been eating.
So as your take from this, and I can see Rach is laughing, and any of you out there that are vegetarians or vegans will be laughing, because I'm sure you're all thinking, whoa, hold on, there's heaps of salads and there's heaps of, beautiful meals that can be made that definitely aren't high fat. And if I can see Elliot laughing as well. So Elliot just is a vegetarian athlete, by the way, and just finished Ultraman Arizona. And I think if anything, he sent me just an update on his like daily diet from, his perspective. But I think he would be the first to say that, his diet is anything but boring in terms of the flavors that you can choose. And I will just say before, like if Elliot or Rach or any other athletes want to jump in who are happy to eat, very flavorsome salads. Rich, I direct you to my favorite chef, who is Yotam Ottolenghi. And I think, any of his books will just blow your mind in terms of the salads that you can create that are full of flavor, not necessarily high in fat. And certainly, will have the amount of carbohydrates that you should want. And I would hope that there would be a number of recipes within even the app that aren't dull. They're certainly not iceberg lettuce. Yeah, I mean, and that's sometimes the perception of salads, isn't it? Is that it's just a handful of iceberg lettuce or maybe a handful of baby spinach, and that's a salad. So
just to, for a moment of self-defense, my wife has been making these wonderful salads that have kale and apples and all sorts of really wonderful vegetables, pomegranate seeds, and seasoning them with a little bit of sesame oil and a lot of rice vinegar. They're very tasty. Shaved Brussels sprouts and shaved broccoli. It's extremely tasty. I'm not a vegetarian. I am a carnivore. I like bacon. I haven't eaten bacon in 9 months, and I miss it.
And Rich, it's all right to eat some bacon, I think. And this is like the don't panic part as well. And like, think about like, even you can look on the program, like on that Saturday, generally there is that cheat meal. If you want to move that to, your morning and eat some bacon and blow out a little bit, if that's going to create some level of, sanity because you need your bacon fix, absolutely do it. That's what I'd recommend. Because I think the big picture here, focus on the big picture here, everyone. It's like you are doing probably 99% better than majority of people out there, in that you're actually taking an interest in your nutrition and you're trying to understand how to fuel yourself. Primarily, we go back to what we're trying to do is, improve your health, and then secondly, improve your performance. And I think when you keep your eye on that prize, then, and it does, look, Rich, you're changing probably years and years of habitual nutritional, knowledge as well from yourself, and that nutritional habits where you primarily ate a lot of bacon, or you ate a lot of meat, and you didn't necessarily have a lot of this roughage in the form of salads and things like that, which is going to take a little bit of time to adjust to, because it's probably a big change to your taste buds as much as anything.
Yeah, there's certainly some of that going on.
Yeah. And you go back to, and sorry, Rach, I'm going to pick on you a little bit, but you talk about that high fat, and I can tell you now, Rich, like Rachel's fat consumption was through the roof. You're not a strict vegan, are you?
Me? No, I'm pescatarian. But
More
yeah, my
pescatarian.
fat calories were about 50% of my total calories. I was probably eating close to 200 grams a day.
Yeah. And the impact on that, yeah, and the unfortunate thing, because of Rachel's injuries, they haven't raced. But what we have seen is that their run off the bike and the GI distress with the run seems to be improving now, because they've cut back their fat consumption. And it doesn't have to be cutting back on fat consumption necessarily for the entire week, but certainly bringing that fat consumption down when it's getting closer to races or race pace type sessions. What we're seeing with Rach is that there is that reporting of like, oh, I didn't need to go to the toilet this time, or I had less GI distress. And it's been really interesting listening to Rach report that, just by, and again, what was their purpose? Their purpose was to try and improve GI distress during races. And so it comes back to the purpose of what you're trying to achieve. And if that fuel for that purpose, maybe let go of some of the beliefs of what you've got around, I need this because this is what I've always done, versus I'm on this program, I want to actually try and learn. And it's got to be two-way. And that's comes back to the previous point of where we've got to be made aware as well of what the issues are in order for us to be able to help you. So when it was like a bit more discussion around that, and, Rach was like, oh, I've always eaten this much fat. Well, you've always had these issues. It's like, let's do something slightly different and see if that results in a different outcome. And I think that's really important. And Rich, like, you know, to your point, and I know you're probably, and we've got a call later, it's like, you know, where is it going wrong with, why is your weight not coming down despite these changes in your dietary intake? Potentially it just takes a little bit of time to actually normalize and get used to what you're doing over an extended period of time to bring about change. So the other point is, like, with all this stuff, don't be so upset if you do, you know, you have a blowout, fine. If it's once every now and then, even if it's once a week, as long as it doesn't derail the entire program, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. But it's when those derailments occur on a regular basis during a week, that's when things are going to go wrong. So it's sort of thinking about keeping your eye on the prize as you go through the weeks. I'm just looking at some questions. Can we put that name? Yeah. Oh, thanks, Jay, for putting that up. And Rich, I can't tell you, I'm sure your wife is a wonderful cook and she's probably doing a great job of feeding you, and you're actually, I'd probably like to see the salads that she is actually making for you. And I'm sure they're wonderful. When you mentioned shaved Brussels sprouts, and if no one's had shaved Brussels sprouts, I would definitely do it. Rich, you can put some bacon in there. Put some chopped up little bits of bacon in with your Brussels sprouts, and you know, 90% of that meal is fantastic. 10% has got a little bit of bacon in it, and you'll probably be a happy man, and you're still doing better than eating a slab. Do you want to go to the next slide, Jay? Oh, that was it. So yeah, look, I think let's just, I'd really be interested in everyone's take on this, because what we don't want is, we certainly don't want what Rach is reporting, where there's that sort of, you know, sensation of failure because you're not hitting the targets that we're hitting. The targets are indications of what we believe are required. Now, first and foremost, based on what you've provided information to us and the information in your training program. But if you feel that is wrong, then let us know. Because sometimes it's things, maybe sessions aren't being recorded, they're being missed, maybe hours are being missed from the training program, or maybe that potential purpose of what you're actually trying to achieve in that short period of time is not actually what we're seeing from our end. Sybil, you're new. I'll call you out if you're all right. But you know, where are you sitting with this at this point in time? Like, have you ever tracked before, for instance?
I track occasionally. I'm actually a precision nutrition level 1 coach.
Okay. So you're familiar with the hand sizing.
I'm very familiar with that. I've coached a few kind of general lifestyle clients. What I'm struggling with is, I'm an Ironman athlete, and I'm struggling with 15 pounds I've gained with menopause. And so I'm not able to help myself. So I'm just trying to, and also it's hard to find resources that are really built around the training needs of a long distance triathlete. So yeah, trying to get my performance back to where it was a few years ago and a few pounds ago. So
and just on that, so obviously, you know, you're postmenopausal. So is the protein amount that we're providing, is that higher than what you would normally consume?
No, it's in the guidelines that I would normally think for myself. I do have trouble reaching it on my own. So I'm excited to see kind of more pointed advice, or that's also consistent with the training that I'm doing. So. Okay.
And while we're just on the protein, and that podcast is a really good one as well, because it does talk about this, and it's that notion of food first, but not always food. Because, like, whilst I would love everyone to be hitting their protein targets through food only, sometimes it's just not possible, either because you're either very big or you're very small. And very small people often struggle to hit the amount of protein because it's a lot more and they just physically can't eat that amount. Or if you're very big, same thing. You may be being requested to eat 220 grams of protein, and that just physically is very hard to consume in food only. So this is where supplementation can be very useful for, especially for the female athletes and those who are in that, potentially postmenopausal to ensure that your protein intake is on point, and also the female athletes that are training with high volume, please do not be afraid of using a supplement if it's required. So whether you use a whey-based protein supplement or a vegetarian or a plant-based supplement, these can be very, very important to meet your nutritional requirements for the purpose of what you're trying to do. And I can't emphasize that enough, or overemphasize that enough, sorry, in that think about what you're trying to do. Yes, food first is great. But if by going food first is actually impacting your health, then are you doing yourself a disservice? And it's just something to think about with that. And it's same with like, fish oils. Let's talk about fish oils. If you're primarily a food first athlete and you want to try and get all your omega-3s through food only, then you're probably going to have to be consuming a decent amount of small oily fish, which a lot of people don't like, or you're going to have to be consuming quite a lot of salmon on a weekly basis. And depending on where that salmon's coming from, which was highlighted in the podcast, it probably is going to have an impact on the omega-3s that you're actually getting. Not only to mention that if a lot of that salmon is coming from farm salmon, there is also the potential for other contaminants within that fish. And so that needs to be weighed up as well when you're thinking about the purpose of what you're trying to change. Back to, and Sybil, so your protein intake is, you're getting that. Are you using a supplement?
I just haven't been very good about it lately, tracking or hitting my protein goals. Like, I just know I'm not hitting them, and I haven't been supplementing.
Okay. And so again, to this is like, what I would say, rather than everyone worrying about like, again, if you don't track and you're not hitting those goals, maybe the simple thing, again, for someone like Sybil would be just working on a simple habit of, I have to have one protein shake per day. And that habit she knows has, and again, I would go more than one scoop. So I would make sure that it at least got 30 grams of protein in it. If not, we know that the body can assimilate around 30 to 40 grams of protein in one go. And yes, you want to pulse out the protein across the day, but maybe to your point, Sybil, is just make sure you have your habit for the week might be just consuming one shake. Now that shake is not going to make or break her diet, but what it is going to do is fortify her diet and ensure that she's probably getting the amount of protein she requires on a daily basis that she's not getting through food only. So it's sort of like the insurance policy. And it's not that the protein shake is going to make her a super athlete. It's just one piece of the nutritional puzzle to ensure that her health is actually being looked after. Does that make sense to everyone? So the protein shake is not the secret sauce. It's just a part of the nutritional puzzle to ensure that her protein is actually on point.
Thank you.
I travel a lot. Amy, do you want to just talk about yours?
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, I'm on the treadmill because I had an early flight this morning.
That's good.
So, yeah. So I really do. I travel a lot, and it's hard because sometimes I'll be like good on the first day, but then it just kind of wears me down, and it just gets harder to focus on my nutrition. So, so I guess any tips you have on mindset. I try to take protein packets with me. I wish I liked the True Protein, and I get the sampler boxes, but I wouldn't mind having more flavor options available for just single serve packets. But yeah, tips on mindset for that would be great.
Say that again. You do use the individual serves? I
do. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I can take them. I don't have to worry about plain security, like, questionable bag of powder. Yeah. So I do that. But it's really, especially with like later nights, like conference activities. I struggle sometimes with, I guess, having enough willpower to stay on track.
Yeah, I think the willpower is certainly, it probably It's one of the hardest things, I think, for people who are traveling and are placed in the scenario where they're either in restaurants with work colleagues or they're in front of a buffet. And I think it's looking at the big purpose. If it's one evening and it's, you do your best where you manage it. So again, educating yourself on what is going to be the best choice. If you looked through the buffet, for instance, and there's fish, there's fried chicken, or there's wings, you're probably going to go, okay, I'm going to choose the fish option. So it's sort of like damage limitation in that sense. And again, with I think Sybil was saying she's precision. So what we talk about is the hands of protein and things like that is, do your best to consume the amount of protein that you believe is required. Now, whether that's one hand or half hand, based on what we're suggesting, do your best with that. The other thing, Amy, is like I have heard of people traveling with and it depends on how long you're away, but, traveling with cans of, whether it be things like smoked mussels or smoked oysters, tins of smoked salmon, tins of salmon or tins of, other types of small oily fish, things like that, these are the snacks that will help me get my protein intake in whilst being away without sort of breaking, the camel's back. They're sort of options you could look to. The other option might be is saying, okay, if you're being based, are you based in hotels? Is that what you're doing? Generally,
yeah,
for a number of days?
Yeah, I'm usually based in hotels, and most of the time it's like 1 or 2 nights, maybe 3, maybe 4 nights. If it's going to be longer than 3 nights and I have control over where I'm staying, then I'll stay at a place that has a kitchen.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say it'd be worth doing that. The other option is if you are, I know I used to have a client who did this, he would pre-order from Whole Foods and have that delivered to his hotel room.
That's a good idea.
And I thought that was really smart. So if he knew that he was staying in a hotel room for 3 days, he would have everything delivered. So he'd have his the Bob's Red Mill single serve oatmeal cups. He'd have those delivered, 3 or 4 of them. So he had his breakfast, a couple of bananas, some apples. He would have some cold chicken breast, like a roast chicken delivered. He'd cut that up. He'd have some wraps delivered, and he'd make his own sort of wraps and salad. He'd either take his own foil or his own little lunchbox and then be able to put those in there and then take that to the conferences that he was going to. Now that's a degree of organization that not everyone has.
Yeah.
I can tell you now, if that guy heard me talking about that, he would be like so chuffed because he was the worst. And you go back to Rich, I can't tell you, getting that guy to eat vegetables, it was the biggest win ever. So, there are levels of complexity of how you're going to get there. I think a big part of nutrition is being organized. And again, you'll hear, I'm not a fan of prepping, in terms of prepping 7 meals for the week and things like that. I think it's an awful way to live your life. But if it works for you, it works. I'm not going to judge you on, how you manage your meals for the week, pre-cooking big batches of food and freezing them. I'm cool with that. I do that all the time, and I reuse meals from the night before. But in terms of level of organization, in Amy's case, if you are doing this on a regular basis and it's not ad hoc, it's this is Amy's life. She is traveling and spending 3 nights in a hotel every week, then maybe look at how you can make that work for you. So pre-ordering from Whole Foods could be the solution. Or what's the delivery services you have over there?
Instacart.
Yeah, Instacart and stuff like that, where it just delivers and drops off to you. The other option could be, these prepackaged meals. We have, things like My Muscle Chef or U Foods and prepackaged meals. There's nothing wrong with those meals for a period of time. And I think I wrote an article or co-authored an article with Jordan Blanco recently, where we had our kitchen, our laundry and our bathroom all ripped out for renovations. And for the period of 8 weeks, I literally lived on these ready meals, which were very, I looked at the macronutrients on each of these. They fit with the meals that I had planned in the app. So they had, 35 grams of protein. I just color coded them visually. I was like, okay, this is a red meal. This is an amber meal. This is a green ready meal. And then I would just order those based on what I had for the week. And that was a really simple way of us managing my nutrition whilst we didn't have a kitchen and we're under a fair bit of sort of social stress. So don't be too afraid of those meal delivery type services or those ready meals that you can buy. Look, the quality in Australia is very good with those. I'm sure there's very good quality meals. And if anyone has any suggestions over those ready meals, if you've eaten them, then again, feel free to share that either on here or in the Facebook group about meals that you would suggest that you could use as part of that traffic light system. And it is something we've talked about and thought, if we could get a meal delivery service linking in with the Fuel In app, where you could actually order meals based on the color coding and your macronutrients, we think it would be a good idea. But again, open to what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything to make it easier. Thank you.
No, that's cool. So give that a go and let everyone know how it goes with the meal delivery and just think about the meals you want.
Yeah.
And go from there. And I can see a lot of you have said, like, the protein shake, like Cam, I know you individually split. If you don't use like the individual serves, as Amy was saying, True Protein does these like sample packs, which are really cool individual serves. But I know like Cam and Pat Romano and that, they would just Ziploc bag their protein, creatine, glutamine into individual bags, right on it. It's a really good habit to get into when you're going away for races, is individually bag those protein, just stick them all in your shaker so that keeps them from spilling as well. So just stick them all in your shaker. It takes up the space of the empty space in the shaker, keeps them all nice and tight. No one's going to argue with you going through, or you don't even need to take it in your carry-on. You can just put it on if you're checking in luggage, you can do that and go from there. And I know that, there you go. That's a good suggestion from Rach, like microwaving egg whites. You can microwave whole eggs as well, by the way. You just get, the little like latte glasses. So you just crack a couple of eggs into that and just sort of give it a little swish with a fork and then just nuke it. Put a bit of paper towel over the top though, because I have made that mistake. You nuke it for too long and it explodes everywhere. But I think if you go in, is it generally 15 or 20 seconds, Rach? You generally do.
I know here at home I do that a lot, but I'll do it for like 30 seconds, like a third of a cup of egg whites for 30 seconds, and it seems to do the trick. Yeah. Or like 15 seconds and like stir it up a little bit and like 15 seconds again. Yeah, that's what I'd probably say, that 15 to 20 seconds, give it a stir and then do it. But total, 30 seconds. And that's a really easy way of getting, a decent breakfast in. Do that with the Bob Red Mills sort of cup of organic oats, put a scoop of protein into that. You've got 40 grams of carbs, 50 grams or 40 grams of protein, a little bit of fat, stick half a banana in there. It's a pretty good breakfast with a couple of eggs. You've got a pretty good makeshift breakfast without even thinking about it. Yeah. It's certainly better than going to Starbucks and getting a venti and a burrito. Sorry, Jay, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say the question from Mary. I want to make sure we have a chance to cover it. Mary, do you want to just unmute and ask your question?
There you go.
Sure. We talked about this a little bit, Jonathan, and last week was definitely an anomaly. I had a colonoscopy on Friday and ran a half marathon on Saturday. So needless to say, I didn't have enough calories, but I still won my age group and did pretty well. But
fantastic. Well done.
Thanks. I feel like I don't have enough time in the day to eat all the food, especially because I'm working full time and I have a pretty stressful job. But also, I think it feels like there's a lot of calories and I'm on a weight loss program. So every day I'm falling short, even if the macros mix is good, but I'm also doing the shorter workouts on the Purple Patch plan. So should I just be adjusting in my head for the time starved version? Because I think we did assume that it was on, I think, Jonathan, we had talked about it's calculating for the max time and not the less time.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, it will be.
Okay.
Yeah, it's based on what they've programmed in for the session. And so I would say just double check, and you can update the duration to whatever you're going to execute it on, and that'll make sure we
I
adjust
don't
it
know if I'm
appropriately.
able to do that. Maybe I just need to go and get help for that. So, okay. I haven't.
Yes, you can.
Can you, Tiger? Oh, Tiger's on here. I saw that. Okay, so I need to go in and do that each week when I move things around.
Yeah, I just update the duration in the sessions, and then it should adjust to that. But that's probably what's happening. And that's a really good point. Like back to the start of it is like, just reach out and tell us, and then we can give you hopefully it's a quick solution to it of just adjusting, like in your case, adjusting the duration of the sessions. That may drop the duration for the week by 50%. That's going to have a significant impact on the amount of energy that we're recommending you take in. And on the flip side, like what we discussed with Rach is, oh, actually, no, you need a lot more calories. You know, in their case, it's like RMR of, is it 2100, Rach?
I think it's 2,500.
Yeah, like, and trust me, I'm sort of like, I think it's an overestimation, but what we do with Rach is that they have an incredibly high metabolism, which we are having to actually respond to with providing extra calories to keep them satiated. So, you know, it's just a little bit of back and forth. No, look, we wholeheartedly don't claim that this is the perfect thing. I think nutrition is a very, very individual based, science. And as much as we can apply principles to all of this, and that generally covers probably 80 to 90% of individuals, there is going to be that individual variation where you just need to tweak things a little bit. And, overall, like Mary, I think also think about like, take note of how you're doing and like, am I feeling satiated based on what they're prescribing? Yeah, I am. Am I taking enough energy to do really well with what my purpose is? Yeah. Is my weight coming down? Yeah, it is. Or no, it's not. Am I over consuming food? Do I feel like completely full all the time? Yeah, I do. Oh, okay. We can probably drop a little bit of that, and you can manually do that as well.
Yeah, I think that's where I fall short. Just with my being middle-aged too, my metabolism, sometimes I underfeed and then I just plateau and I don't move at all. And so that's what I'm kind of nervous about happening. If I'm supposed to eat more, then I should be eating more and kind of keep the metabolism going. And the hunger cues are hard for me too, because I'm just anxious and stressed out all the time. So I don't get hungry if today I didn't eat till 3 o'clock because I couldn't break away from my computer. So it's just one of those things where if I get in it, I don't get hunger cues until I realize I'm going to crash. So I've got to be better about all that stuff, but I wanted to just make sure that I shouldn't stress too much about the total calories if I'm not hitting them.
Can I jump quick on the today's plan stuff for Purple Patch in terms of over under?
Say that again, Tiger.
Oh, I was just going to say really quick on the kind of today's plan over under. Be aware that like, yes, if you're just doing time starved, then there's some reduction, but on the other hand, you might have like a weekend ride. That's always defaulted to like the indoor version. So and that's oftentimes like half the time, let's say, of the prescribed outdoor ride. So it really does fall on both sides. I would say just across the board to edit your kind of time for those sessions, because it might be over or it might be under. And I can help anybody who's a Purple Patcher. If you guys don't know how to do that, I can show you how.
Yeah, and actually that's a good note because I do the outdoor rides on the weekends and go a lot longer. So I just won't change that day. Thanks.
Cool. What else? Is there any other Freshly? So it looks like some of you have used the delivery services when you going or going. The other option as well, Amy, the other thing you could do is just look wherever your hotel is in the local area and then just do a Google map search and just type in Whole Foods or another supermarket and just see what's in the local area and go and visit that. And that's something you can think about doing as well. A lot of it is a lot of nutrition is just about the practicalities. You know, the practical element of actually getting the amount of food in that you require as well is a big part of this. Like, it's all well and good with the science. The science is fascinating. Science is interesting. The science is changing all the time. But if you don't actually get the food in the first place, or the actual requirements, then the science sort of falls by the wayside. So don't get lost in the science, but a lot of the time it's just about eating.
Hey, Scott, I have
yeah.
one more question if you're taking another question. Otherwise, I can look later.
Yeah, go on.
One of the things that Lose It does is it integrates into Apple Health. And so if you work out, say with a power meter, and your workout gets reflected into Lose It, the calories burned as estimated by the power meter show up in Lose It as a deficit. Like if I went and did 1,000-calorie workout this morning, and Lose It shows that, you know, my calorie target for the day is 3,000 calories. Now I ignore that. So if the fuel in plan says eat 2,000 calories, 75 grams fat, and 160 grams protein, that's what I do. But what I'm kind of curious about is, to what extent are these calorie burn numbers from a power meter? Like, a power meter is like physical wattage, like that power came from somewhere. So to what extent does that offset your caloric demand for the day?
I think the first problem is, like, how long was that session for 1,000-calorie burn?
90 minutes.
Yeah, like, I'd struggle to believe, like, I think it's a massive overestimation. Like, Rach, what would you burn in like that sort of session, do you think?
In an hour. Well, I mean, it's different.
90 minutes.
It was a VO2 max workout. I was doing, zone 5 intervals for.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea. I've never really tracked calories in a workout. I just estimate, like, that's your job.
Yeah, look, I mean, the other thing, Rich, did you eat anything during that session?
Yeah, I ate 2 goos.
Okay, so
100 calories each. 100
calories each. So there's 200 calories. I would estimate that is probably overshooting by as much as 25%, 25 to 30% potentially on the estimation of caloric burn. So take another 300. So maybe you're 500 calories down by the end of it. And then you put into that individual variation on, you can go and get like a metabolic cart done, and, you see some numbers. Some people will burn somewhere like 330 an hour, some people, depending, and it's all based on intensity. I do think that majority of those estimations, which is why certainly MyFitnessPal, I tell people to disconnect any of their Garmin or anything like that from MyFitnessPal, so it doesn't confuse the numbers and push you into, like what you're saying, like, here's 2,000 calories, but because you burnt 1,000 calories, consume an extra 1,000 calories, because that's going to confuse you with whatever your purpose is, which might be to lose weight. You'd view those extra calories that you've burnt, or that energy expenditure, as being sort of, money in the bank, and that you've actually done a good job. Why would you go and then completely replenish that if your purpose is to try and reduce body fat and reduce weight? So that's how I'd be thinking about that. And I know, Rich, we've got a call after this, and that's what we'll probably get into more, is like, what are you doing before, during, and after that may be having an impact on potentially that total caloric burn and how your body's reacting to it. It's a tricky one. Look, it is a tricky one, and I'm always fascinated with what the estimated caloric burn is from sessions. Because the other thing you have to remember is, like, if you were going through 1,000, like, when I've seen some of these estimations, like, you imagine you're doing a 70.3, and per hour you're burning through, let's say even 800 calories an hour. Like, you're in a huge deficit after 5 hours, yet people aren't dropping off the face of the earth with these races. So I think there is sort of this, like, there needs to be a bit of calibration with what these estimations of caloric expenditure are when you're looking at it. And especially if you go into the longer duration, like an Ironman, there's no way that you're burning 1,000 calories an hour when you're doing that, because you just physically wouldn't be able to. You can't get in that many calories. I mean, most of you at best are probably getting 300 calories in an hour. And, the really good athletes are probably getting in 400 to 500 calories an hour, but not much above that. So you potentially would be in a 500 calorie deficit, per hour moving forward, which would result in you probably, crashing pretty hard. I mean, what was your intake in 70.3, Rach? Well, actually, it varied, didn't it?
Yeah.
Depending on which race you were doing.
Yeah, I mean, 70.3, I would take 6 or 7. I would take like 6 gels on the bike and 3 gels on the run. So I feel like that's a lot.
6 gels, so let's say it's 180, 200 grams. And what the bike would take you, what, 2 and
a bit, 2 and a quarter to 2.5, depending on the course.
Yeah, so you're getting like 90 odd grams an hour in, and then on the run, somewhere between sort of 60 and 70 grams an hour on that, which, is a really good effort. I wouldn't say it's too much. I'd say it's probably for what you're putting out. The bike probably maybe a little bit under, the run probably bang on point. But for the average person, and this is the point of what we've talked about on other ones, where it's like, practice your race fueling in training. The majority of athletes are probably coming up around, somewhere like 30 to 40 grams of carbs per hour, and actually going, wow, and then if you say I'm only taking in 40 grams an hour, but you're in, and that translates to 160 calories an hour, you see where this sort of, ultimate deficit is going to occur. We can talk about that. Maybe that's the next one we'll do. We'll talk about, I'll have a look into the science of these. I'll see if there's any data on there out with the power meters and what estimated caloric burns are, and whether there's any research on overestimations and things. Because I know there's been a number of studies looking at, say, Garmin, Apple, Fitbit and things like that, and their overestimation on calories. With, I think Apple Watch came out the worst with about a 35% overestimation on caloric burn. So if you are basing your your energy intake off, say an Apple Watch and what it's saying to you, what you're burning on a day, you might be completely confused, because it's probably saying you're burning thousands and thousands of calories per day. And that's where you come back to, like, what's your body doing? Like when you physically look at yourself, maybe your waist circumference, how are your genes fitting on you? If you're using a scale, what does the scale say? Sometimes those things are better measures. And how's your subjective, feeling? Is that a better way of sort of measuring it, rather than being so focused on the data? And I think that's something just to think about. Heart rate should be determining calories versus watts. Yeah. And I think that's probably a good point as well. Rich, what Rach is saying there is that heart rate is probably, depending on what your heart rate was in that session, that's what's going to be driving. Were you wearing a heart rate strap as well? Yep. Yeah. And it depends. I agree, Scott, as well, what you're saying. It depends on the size. So the session, the individual, how big they are, their individual makeup is going to have a massive impact on total caloric expenditure as well. So, the difference between male and female as well. And we can talk about that probably on another one as well, in terms of, fuel utilization. Is that difference in fuel utilization, does it actually have an impact on what you should be taking as a male or a female athlete? And the jury, honestly, is still out. Like, there seems to be biological differences in the way in which you use fuel, but it doesn't seem to be impacted by what you actually take in, which seems sort of counterintuitive. But at this point in time, that's what the science is saying. But we can get into that.
All right.
Okay.
I think we're up on time, and I know you've got an important appointment with an important client.
I do.
Right after.
So look, I know it was probably more conversational, this one, as opposed to points, but hopefully you find that of value. I think it makes you think about, I think, although it's called autopilot and co-pilot and one-to-one, I think don't go into autopilot if you are there. Like, think about what you're trying to achieve. I think that's the most important thing. Like, just ask yourself, what am I doing here? And how am I working with my coach? And how are we working with us to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve? And I think that's the really big take home message from this, is just, take a moment to reflect on what you're doing and how you could potentially do it. If it's going really well, great. But if there are things that you're sort of finding are a little bit like, I'm just not nailing it, like, let us know.